I am Alira Vaughn, and I am 26 years old. The day I stood in that courtroom, I knew my life was about to split into two versions: who I had been before, and the woman I would be forced to become. The air inside the room felt sharp, like it could cut skin. Wooden benches lined the walls, filled with strangers who had no idea they were about to witness the quiet destruction of someone else's future. My hands were steady at my sides, but my chest felt hollow, as if something essential had already been taken from me. Before we continue, please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps stories like this reach people who understand sacrifice, betrayal, and silent strength. The judge's voice echoed as he asked if I understood the consequences of my decision. My lawyer leaned in close, his voice low and urgent. "This is your last chance," he whispered. "Once you say yes, there's no undoing it." I didn't answer him right away. Instead, my eyes moved past the judge, past the microphones, past the rows of strangers, until they landed on the back row. That was where my younger sister, Naya, sat. Her hands trembled as she pressed them against her face, shoulders shaking with quiet sobs she was trying and failing to contain. She looked small that day, younger than her years. Terrified. That fear was the reason I was there. "I understand," I said calmly. No one in that courtroom understood what it truly cost me to say those words. The charges were severe: armed robbery, conspiracy, aggravated assault. Crimes that could erase a life. Crimes I did not commit. Crimes I agreed to carry because the real culprit shared my blood. When the gavel struck, the sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. 9 years. That was the sentence. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't collapse the way people expect when a life ends in front of them. As officers approached to escort me away, cold steel waiting to replace freedom, I turned one last time toward my sister. "You'll be okay now," I said softly. She sobbed harder, nodding through tears. She didn't promise anything. She didn't swear she would wait for me or make things right. There were no vows spoken, no gratitude expressed. Just silence. And that silence followed me all the way out of the room, unaware that one day it would speak louder than any scream. Prison did not break me all at once. It did something worse. It stripped me slowly, piece by piece. The first weeks were the hardest. The air felt heavy with despair. Nights were louder than days. Metal doors slammed. Voices echoed through concrete halls. Sleep was never guaranteed. You had to earn it or steal it in pieces. I learned quickly that kindness could be mistaken for weakness, and silence could be misread as arrogance. My cellmate, Raina, was sharp-tongued and observant. She watched me for days before finally asking the question everyone eventually asks. "So," she said one night, lying on her bunk, staring at the ceiling, "what are you really in for?" I hesitated. "A mistake," I said. Raina laughed, a bitter, knowing sound. "That's what everyone says." I didn't correct her. Some truths are heavier when spoken aloud. At first, letters came often. They arrived folded neatly, smelling faintly of home. Updates about birthdays, holidays, ordinary things I could no longer touch. Most of them were from Naya. Pages filled with guilt, apologies, and promises she wrote as if repeating them enough times would make them real. "I'll make it up to you. I'll be here when you get out. I'll never forget what you did for me." I read those lines again and again during long nights when sleep refused to come. I memorized the curves of her handwriting. Those letters became my anchor, my proof that my sacrifice had meaning. I survived by routine, by discipline, by refusing to let bitterness harden my heart completely. Still, each passing year carved something out of me. Hope thinned, trust faded, and slowly, almost without warning, the letters stopped coming. Outside those walls, Naya's life continued without me. She found work, then comfort, then ambition. She stopped introducing herself as my sister and started living as if she were an only child. The guilt that once haunted her softened into justification. "Alira is strong," she told herself. "She can handle it." When our mother died suddenly during my 5th year inside, the news arrived late and without warmth. A thin envelope. Formal language. No compassion. No chance to say goodbye. I sat on my bunk staring at the paper, my hands numb. "They didn't let you see her?" Raina asked quietly. I shook my head. That night, something inside me broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. I stopped waiting for apologies. Stopped dreaming about reunions that might never come. Instead, I began preparing for a future that required no one. I studied. I worked. I saved every small prison credit I earned. Freedom, I told myself, would be something I walked into alone. The morning of my release arrived without ceremony. No crowd. No celebration. Just a guard calling my name and handing me a small box of belongings that felt far too light for 9 stolen years. When I stepped beyond the final gate, sunlight hit my face differently than I remembered. Brighter. Sharper. Almost painful. I paused, breathing deeply, still expecting, despite everything, to see someone waiting. A familiar face. A sign. A hug. The parking lot was nearly empty. Across the street, a woman leaned against a silver SUV, sunglasses hiding her eyes. For a moment, I didn't recognize her. Then she smiled. It was Naya, but the smile felt wrong. Tight. Rehearsed. You look different, she said instead of I'm sorry. So do you, I replied. There was no embrace. No tears. Just distance standing between us, thicker than prison walls. As I reached for my bag, she added casually, we need to talk. Things have changed. In that moment, I felt it, a shift in the air. Freedom had arrived, but peace had not. The drive away from the prison was quiet in a way that made my chest tighten. The car smelled expensive, new leather, unfamiliar perfume, the hum of a life that had moved on. I watched the road pass by, noticing how the world had advanced without me. New buildings. Digital billboards. Names I didn't recognize. I thought you'd bring Mom's old car, I said gently. That was sold years ago, Naya replied. Needed the money. I nodded, though something twisted painfully inside my chest. Where are we going? I asked. She hesitated. Not home. There is no home anymore. The words landed heavier than my sentence ever had. She didn't take me to an apartment or a family house. Instead, we stopped at a small cafe on the edge of the city. Inside, conversations buzzed softly. Free people discussing ordinary problems. It felt wrong to sit among them. Once seated, Naya leaned forward. I'll be honest with you. I raised an eyebrow. You weren't before. She ignored it. The house was in Mom's name. After she died, there were debts. Medical bills. Loans. Where did the money go? I asked. Life, she replied. School. Investments. Getting settled. I studied her face, the confidence, the ease, the absence of guilt. You promised you'd take care of things, I said quietly. I did, she snapped. Then softer. I took care of myself. She slid an envelope across the table. This should help you get started. Inside was cash and an address. I counted it once. It wasn't enough. Not even close. You think this is enough? I asked. What do you expect? She shot back. I didn't ask you to take the fall. Yes, you did, I replied evenly. You begged me. She scoffed. You chose to. That sentence changed everything. I didn't know it yet, but that moment marked the end of the sister I thought I had protected. I didn't know yet that a deeper betrayal was waiting. And I didn't know yet that my real sentence was only just beginning. The place Naya dropped me at was exactly what she had promised, temporary. A narrow building tucked behind a row of neglected shops on the far edge of the city. The paint on the walls was chipped, the hallway lights flickered, and the air smelled faintly of damp concrete and old detergent. She didn't walk me inside. She didn't offer help with my bag. This is it, she said, handing me the key. It's prepaid for a month. I nodded. Thank you. She exhaled in relief, as if she'd been waiting for permission to leave. I have a meeting, she said, already stepping back toward her car. We'll talk later. She didn't wait for an answer. I watched her drive away until the car disappeared around the corner. Then I turned and climbed the stairs alone. The room was small, bare. A bed, a table, a chair, and a window that faced a brick wall. I set my bag down and sat on the edge of the mattress, listening to the silence. For the first time since my release, anger crept in. Not explosive. Not loud. Something deeper. Something patient. All right, I whispered to the empty room. I see now. The first week of freedom felt heavier than prison ever had. Inside, every hour had a purpose. A bell. A count. A schedule. Outside, time stretched endlessly, unstructured and unforgiving. I woke each morning disoriented, expecting the clang of metal doors, only to be met with silence that felt unfamiliar and unsafe. I spent hours sitting by the window, watching people pass with purpose. They walked fast. They talked on phones. They laughed. They complained about traffic and weather and things that once felt normal to me. I didn't know how to rejoin them. On the 5th day, a letter arrived. It wasn't handwritten. It wasn't from Naya. It bore the seal of a legal firm. I read it once. Then again. Then a third time before the words finally settled. Notice of estate review and property hearing. My name was printed in bold, clean, official, unfamiliar in a context that didn't include an inmate number. Confused and unsettled, I followed the address listed at the bottom the next morning. The building was sleek and quiet. Polished floors. Neutral walls. A receptionist studied my file, then looked up at me with a flicker of surprise. "You're expected," she said, gesturing toward a conference room. No one had expected me anywhere in a very long time. Inside the room sat 3 people in tailored suits and one face I recognized instantly. "Naya." She looked startled to see me. "You came?" she asked. I didn't answer her. An older man at the head of the table adjusted his glasses and spoke gently. "Thank you for coming. This concerns your late mother's estate." My pulse quickened. I was told everything was settled. "That's not entirely accurate," he replied, sliding a folder toward me. "According to these records, you were listed as a co-beneficiary." Naya stood abruptly. "That's not relevant anymore," she snapped. The lawyer looked unimpressed. "It's very relevant, especially given certain transactions made without full disclosure." I turned toward my sister. "What did you do?" She clenched her jaw. "I did what I had to." The lawyer cleared his throat. "After your mother's passing, the property could not be legally transferred without both beneficiaries' consent. Instead, signatures were submitted claiming power of attorney that did not exist." My breath caught. "You forged my name?" Naya's eyes darted around the room. "You were in prison. I couldn't reach you." "You could have," I said quietly. "You chose not to." The lawyer's voice remained calm. "These actions constitute fraud." The word hung in the air. I left the building shaking, not from fear but from revelation. All those years I believed I had sacrificed myself to protect my sister suddenly felt poisoned. Not because I regretted loving her, but because she had used that love as permission. That night my phone rang. Naya's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring. Then again. Finally I answered. "Please," she said immediately, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean for it to get this far." I stared at the ceiling. "You never do. Just help me this once more," she begged. "We're family." "I already did," I replied. 9 years ago. I ended the call. For the first time since my release, I felt something close to control. The next morning, I returned to the legal office alone. The lawyer looked up as I entered, unsurprised. "Have you made a decision?" "Yes." He gestured for me to sit, but I remained standing. "I won't lie for her. I won't protect her anymore." He studied my face, then nodded. "Then the process will move forward." For over an hour, I told the truth. Every detail. Every document I never signed. Every letter I never received. As I spoke, something inside me loosened. Not revenge, not satisfaction, but release. "There will be consequences," the lawyer said carefully. "There already were," I replied. 2 weeks later, Naya was arrested. Fraud. Forgery. Obstruction. The same words that once hovered over my life now followed hers. She called from holding. I answered. "They're charging me," she sobbed. "You promised you'd always protect me." I was quiet for a long moment. "I protected you when you needed it. You used it when you didn't. You ruined my life," she snapped. "No," I said calmly. "You built this." I just stepped out of the way. When the call ended, I didn't cry. With the case ongoing, I focused on rebuilding. I cleaned offices at night. Stocked shelves before dawn. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. People didn't ask questions. They didn't look at me like I was broken. Slowly, I saved. One afternoon, the lawyer called. "The property sale has been voided. The estate has been reassessed." Weeks later, I stood in front of my childhood home, weathered, quieter, but still standing. It was mine. Not as compensation. As correction. This wasn't the end. What came next would finally decide who I became after sacrifice. Standing in front of the house felt unreal. The structure looked smaller than it did in my memories, like time had quietly shrunk it while I was gone. The paint was faded, the garden overgrown, and the windows carried the dull film of neglect. Still, it was standing. Still rooted. Still waiting. I unlocked the door slowly. The hinges creaked as if they were waking from a long sleep. Dust floated through the air, catching the sunlight in thin golden lines. The house smelled like old wood and forgotten moments. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me, the sound echoing softly through empty rooms. For a long time, I didn't move. This place held everything I had lost: childhood laughter, late-night arguments, my mother's tired footsteps pacing the hallway when she couldn't sleep. I ran my fingers along the wall, grounding myself. For years, I had imagined freedom as something loud and dramatic. I hadn't realized it could arrive quietly, wrapped in stillness. I sat on the living room floor and let myself breathe. The legal process continued, slow and methodical. I stayed away from the noise, away from opinions, away from anyone who wanted me to feel guilty for finally choosing myself. I learned quickly that people loved sacrifice when they didn't have to bleed for it themselves. Some days were harder than others. There were mornings I woke up convinced I had missed a count. Nights when sirens outside made my heart race. Freedom didn't erase prison from my body. It had rewired me. I learned to be patient with that. I furnished the house one piece at a time. Nothing expensive. Nothing flashy. A table from a second-hand shop. Curtains sewn by hand. A mattress that didn't squeak when I moved. Each item felt like a declaration. I am here. I am staying. I took evening classes, sitting among people half my age who complained about deadlines and boredom. They had no idea how precious those complaints sounded to me. I listened more than I spoke. Knowledge felt like a second chance my past hadn't expected me to take. Naya was sentenced 3 months later. 3 years. I attended the hearing alone, sitting quietly in the back row. She stood at the front, pale and shaking, looking smaller than she ever had. Our eyes met only once. There was no anger left in me. Just distance. Clean and final. Outside the courthouse, a reporter recognized my name and asked a question I had been rehearsing answers for in my head for weeks. Do you regret telling the truth? I paused. I regret lying the first time, I said. That answer followed me home. Rebuilding wasn't fast. It wasn't neat. But it was honest. I worked mornings at a warehouse and evenings tutoring adults who were learning to read for the first time. Some of them had been incarcerated. Some were newly released. They didn't ask about my past, and I didn't offer it. We shared something quieter, understanding. One woman, freshly out after serving a decade, once asked me, "How do you stop feeling like your worst mistake is your whole identity?" I thought about it for a long time before answering. You build something bigger, I said. Something the mistake can't swallow. On the first anniversary of my release, I planted a small garden behind the house. My hands in the soil felt symbolic, grounding myself in something living. I planted herbs, tomatoes, flowers my mother used to love. Growth didn't feel rushed here. It felt earned. I stopped expecting apologies. I stopped waiting for closure from people who benefited from my silence. I learned that forgiveness didn't mean reconciliation. It meant releasing myself from the need to keep proving my worth through suffering. 2 years later, I stood in front of a classroom of women recently released from prison. Their faces carried fear, hope, and disbelief all at once. I recognized it instantly. I won't tell you it's easy, I said. But I will tell you this. Your story is not finished just because someone else tried to write the ending. Afterward, one of them hugged me so tightly I felt my breath leave my body. Thank you, she whispered, for surviving. That word stayed with me. Surviving hadn't been my goal anymore. Living was. There were nights I still dreamed of the courtroom, of the gavel, of the moment my life stopped belonging to me. But when I woke up, I was home. In my bed. In my future. I learned that loyalty without boundaries is self-destruction dressed as love. That sacrifice means nothing if it erases your humanity. And that silence, when chosen again and again, becomes a cage. Freedom didn't come when the prison gates opened. It came when I stopped sacrificing myself for someone who never would. On the 7th anniversary of my release, I stood alone in the garden behind the house, dirt under my nails, sunlight on my face. I wasn't haunted anymore. I was informed, strengthened, awake. I had gone to prison for love. I had walked out into betrayal, and I had rebuilt my life with truth. What happened the day I was freed shocked me, but it also saved me, because sometimes the greatest betrayal is the one that finally forces you to choose yourself. And if this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Tap the bell so you don't miss future folktales, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Share this story with friends, family, and loved ones, because someone out there needs to remember that sacrifice should never cost them their soul.